Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition.
It's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Good morning, Crosspointe. About a week ago, I checked in with a friend, a fellow Crosspointer, and I was checking in because over the last few years, he and I have had conversations about our rising anxiety surrounding the social and political division that just seems to be getting worse. And with the election season coming up, I decided I would check in with him. We had a good exchange about that and shared some hope and some peace. And then as that was coming to a close, I said, okay, well, I'm off to cobble together a 42-minute offering of faith, hope, and love. And I was referring to the service that I'm a part of putting together each week. And then he responded with this: hey, if it's any help, please know that 42 minutes helps keep a whole lot of us a little more sane and at peace every week. Personally, it's a reminder that I am accountable to you, Jonathan, Steve, and all the other members of Crosspointe, the church, to try to remember to do what Christ would ask me to do, and even to actually do it. And that was just a great reminder for me about what we are, who we are as a church. We are a community of people living in a way, and we need each other. We need each other for encouragement to live the way of Christ. So I hope that you know that your involvement in this community matters, and that you taking the time to be here for these 42 minutes, give or take, on a Sunday, that matters. But also, and even more, your willingness to be connected with others in this community and to offer encouragement along this path. You may not even know that that's what you're doing at times. My friend was trying to tell me that he had been encouraged, and he encouraged me. Probably doesn't even know it until seeing this. We're going to start with a song called How Bad We Need Each Other. And this song has become really important to our community over the last few years. And actually, this video that you're going to see was the first full band collaboration that we did back in March when the lockdown first started. So we're really glad you're here. Hope you have a great morning. One, two, three, four. Life is too far to walk alone. You can't do it on your own. It's like bare hands digging through stone. And if things go down much steeper hills, even money won't pay these bills. But time is sure to show that people gonna be okay.
Storms never come to stay, they just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, they are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. Ooh, 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 ooh. And I can get so high, I get so high on myself sometimes. Feels like I'm drifting a million miles from this planet. What a shame it would be to look back on my life and realize that I've taken you and you for granted. People gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay, they just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, they are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And I can't see what's a mile around the bend, and I do not know where this world is headed or where they end. But you gave me this smile, so I threw away my frown. And I ain't gonna pick up, no you don't pick up what you just put down. People gonna be okay. Storms that come to stay, they just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, they are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. All people gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay, they just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, they are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And I need you more than I'll let it show. And you need me more than you know. And we can walk one single mile alone. I need you, so don't beg.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment I wake up till I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You've led me through the fire in darkest night. You were close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down, I'm surrendered now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God. I will sing of the goodness of God.
Hi Crosspointe. I want to make you aware of a few changes that we're making to our online email communications. Pre-COVID, we used to send out one email on Fridays that had a devotional. It had a list of a lot of things that we wanted to let you know about. We're going to still send out that email, but we're actually going to move it to Wednesdays. So look for an email on Wednesday afternoon or evening that is what you would typically receive on a Friday. That has at the top a message or a devotional or a thought from one of our pastors or staff. And then it's got things that you need to keep on your radar, things to think in longer term, registrations that are ongoing, upcoming events, things like that. So that's coming out on Wednesdays. And then on Saturdays, you might have already noticed, we send out an email that has links for that Sunday only and for the upcoming week. That has changed. The look has changed just a little bit, and I want to walk you through what that looks like. First, at the top, you'll see that there are links to the upcoming service for that Sunday, for the lobby, for Sunday morning, anything that's happening on Sunday. If you scroll down a little bit further, you'll see things like links for student ministry, high school and middle school events, and for their online services. Scroll down even further and you'll see the links to online gatherings for that week. Things like the single parenting group, the living alone group, Wake Up Man, Unpolished, which is a group for women that's actually meeting this week. Anything that's happening as an online group, an online gathering for that specific week, you'll find in this e-news. If for some reason you don't receive the e-news, these emails, and you'd like to, it's real simple. Just go to crosspoint.org/e-news and it'll pull up a form where you can put in your preferences and your information so you can start receiving those emails. And then lastly, if you'd like to contribute to something that to contribute financially to Crosspointe, to the things that we do, you can go to crosspoint.org/contribute. You can text 77977 and you'll find multiple ways that you can give financially to what we're doing here, to paying bills, to ministry programs, to outreach, all of those things that we do at Crosspointe. Really, really grateful to you, really thankful to be in community with you, and hope that you have a fantastic week.
For the past several weeks, we've been in a series called Yesterday, Today, and Forever.
That's a phrase that's applied to Jesus at the end of the book of Hebrews. And it's offered by the author to the readers as an encouragement and as a reminder that the game doesn't change even though the field is constantly changing. That no matter the circumstances people find themselves in the midst of, the way of Jesus is how we're going to navigate that. And even though Solomon once mused that there's nothing new under the sun, that the same things keep happening over and over and over, they just keep popping up in new wrappers, God is always deepening and broadening and illuminating us in those same circumstances. As individuals or generationally, we go through the same things, but the way of Christ is how we come to live and embody deeper awareness and deeper love and deeper justice every time around. So today, I want to use some visuals to make my point. It's a very similar message that I have done years ago, but that's completely biblical to do that. There's nothing new under the sun. I'm just proving my biblical acumen by recycling. There's several ways of showing the winding river of the bigger plot points, the biblical narrative. And I want to give you one that I think is helpful. And so I'm going to draw. I'm going to use the power of digital technology, and I'm going to draw. So kids, grab a pencil and paper and follow along if you want to. When I'm finished, this won't be a Bob Ross, but my haircut should have already given that away. So the Bible begins in Genesis. And it begins with there's a garden, and there's a tree, and there are people living in shalom, which is translated peace. And shalom doesn't just mean the absence of conflict. It's the presence of something. It's harmony. So all of life, all of creation is in shalom. Things are how they should be. That is, the Bible starts not with problems, but with blessing, unlimited potential, and goodness. So many of us, we think that the Bible starts telling us what has gone wrong, but it starts telling us how right everything fundamentally is. And into this garden are placed Adam and Eve, naked people who we can assume had no belly buttons. And these are the opening scenes in the Bible. Well, the Bible ends very similarly. It ends in the book of Revelation. John is stranded on Patmos and has these visions, and there's a tree, there's a garden, there's a river. There are people living in shalom. So the Bible ends not with everybody going up to heaven. It doesn't end with the end of the world, but it talks about heaven coming down. The remaking of the world happens. Earth and heaven and earth, understood as the same place, and God and humanity being on the same plane. So it ends where it begins. Garden in the beginning, garden in the end, tree to start with, tree to end with, on earth as it is in heaven, people and God and creation all in harmony. But back to those first people. See, in Genesis, what happens is in the midst of all this blessing, they blow it. They eat the fruit they're not supposed to eat, as the story tells us. The story depicts the introduction of people not embracing contentment. They desire more than what has been given. They cast off trust. They want more. The problems then are the problems now. And this comes with a curse, death. Like Jonathan taught us last week, though, death not just in now you're a corpse, but it's a picture of life and vitality being replaced with desperate, self-centered, fearful survival, like counting down your days. It's something other than living entirely. And so there's a curse mingled with the blessing of existence, and it affects Eve producing children. It affects Adam's sense of value coming from what he produces with his hands. Everything is affected. But then there's this interesting little thing in Genesis 3 that says there will be thorns, which matter to all of us, but imagine being naked. That's quite a detail. So they're cast out of the garden, and now there are thorns. There are thorns, and that's not just a way of talking about a particular kind of botany. It's a way of describing reality now. They're cast out of the garden, and then there's Noah's flood, and then the first Hebrews, Abraham and Sarah and Hagar and Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Rachel and so many more, and the promise that whatever is going to be made right in this world is going to come from the progeny of these folks. And then there's this fascinating story and a series of events
where the Hebrew people are enslaved in Egypt for hundreds of years. The curse of greed and power and dehumanization, destroying countless lives. Equal humans reduced to some other human's utility, to something worse than a pet. But the Israelites, they hold on. For these hundreds of years, they hold on. And then Moses, he leaves. That's another fascinating story, but Moses finds himself running for his life in many ways. And he has an encounter with a bush. And there are numerous shrubs and plants in this part of the world. And this one is traditionally understood, this encounter, this one Moses encounters, as it was a Sinai bush. That's a thorn bush, a particular kind of thorn bush whose thorns were curved somewhat, so you would be able to put your hand into the foliage, but when you pull your hand out, that's when it cuts you. It's almost like a trap. And it's from this bush the voice of God speaks. This bush was on fire. That's what caught Moses' attention in the first place. But it's not burning. It's on fire, but it's not burning. Moses notices that the bush is alight, but it's not turning to ash. So this is something different. And the voice of the I Am commissions Moses to go back to Egypt to free people enslaved for generations. And God speaks from a thorn bush. And so Moses goes. He goes back. Let my people go, and the 10 plagues. And finally, Pharaoh relents and lets the people go and crosses the sea, and the army of Egypt is caught. They were chasing him. They're caught in the water. And Moses leads them to Sinai, to Mount Sinai. And all the people are camped out at the foot of Mount Sinai while Moses goes to the top to receive the law. Now, you might hear that word Sinai, and remember just a second ago I told you that the bush was called a Sinai. Those words are similar on purpose. That bush being a Sinai, there's an interesting perspective that Mount Sinai is named such because it has these thorn bushes growing here and there all over it. And so perhaps Moses had to push through some of these thorn bushes to get to the top. His legs and his garments being scratched and torn, where he would receive the covenant of God and the commandments. Now, these commandments were how to be a people, how to treat each other, how to perform very specific rituals for specific reasons, how to disassociate from other nations who surrounded the Israelites and who were antagonistic to their faith and to their survival. And the bottom line is, if you're going to start from scratch, if you're going to completely start over as a people, you're going to have some do's and don'ts that need to be understood very early on. So they get this covenant and this very sophisticated, thick law. And only, the 10 Commandments are only just a representative sample of the hundreds of laws. And Moses comes back down and gives these laws to the people. Now, millennia later, the Apostle Paul makes an interesting statement about these laws, this Torah, this leading. And what happens when we try to be rule followers and try to make the substance of your faith about living within the rule system? He makes an interesting statement. He says in Galatians, all who rely on works of the law are under a curse. For it is written, cursed be everyone who does not abide by all the things written in the book of the law and do them. He refers to it as another world of curse. That it is sort of a curse, because you can't just say, well, I got 2 out of 5. Cursed is anybody that tries to live by the law and then even messes up 1. Now, Paul was very proud of his Jewishness. He boasted about his heritage, his family, his tradition at numerous points in his writings. But he also came to see the weight of all of those laws, all of those hundreds of laws, thousands of interpretations, competing interpretations, and the relentlessness of the purity code and the unending obligations. He started to see all of this as something that worked against people enjoying their God-given lives at one point. He came to understand that it's our faith and our love that fulfill the commandments, not our being rigid rule followers. It's that latter that keeps us tangled up in thorns. and separated from each other and from God. It costs us shalom on every level. He called it a curse because all it ever seemed to do was magnify and almost taunt our humanity, our frailty. But it provided no lasting means for solving human problems. I often think about this, and I think about all the people who have tried countless diets, how they've got like this little window into how this works. Here's the right thing to do and to eat, and you're feeling good because you're following the rules, and 2 months later you've broken rules and more rules, and now you're less and less eager about it, and then you start to feel worse than you did. You feel ashamed. You feel envious of others who seem to be doing fine. You start to feel hopeless. You start to feel bitter. It's almost like a curse. And you can blame yourself or blame the diet. It just doesn't seem to work. This is a little window into what Paul might have been saying. You see the sense of this pervasive curse. There's always something working from the outside or from within, tearing away, halting progress, adding pain to what might have otherwise been pleasurable, until finally it's got us stopped in our tracks, and it's grabbing us by the chin and making us think that all we can see is shame and guilt and all that's gone wrong. And it happens to each of us as individuals, and it happens intergenerationally. Generations of conflict, trying to establish peace, but succumbing to the allure of power, of trying to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with the divine, but getting tripped up on greed and lust and revenge. Inevitably distrusting the power of goodness and love in the face of so many thorns. It's like, who's got time? Who's got time and energy to be kind and loving? The world is tearing me to pieces. I got to stay vigilant, not kind. And then comes Jesus of Nazareth, born of a virgin, tempted in every way to do others wrong. But he never gives in. He never sinned against anyone or God. One who loved those who despised him in return. He was someone who blessed even as he was mocked and lied about. He confronted those who could have made his life easier if he had just gone along with the status quo. He touched the untouchable. He defended the vulnerable. He included the excluded. And he was killed for not conforming to the way of the powers that be and their way of sin, their way of corruption. They killed him. And as they murdered him as a common criminal between two other bandits, mocking him all the while, as they murdered him, somewhere in this process, they placed on his head what? A crown of thorns. Almost as if to say, what rules over the rest of us, Jesus made serve him for his own incredibly significant purposes. Almost as if to say, this Jesus isn't the Lord of some utopia. A word, by the way, that means no place. He's not the Lord of some other utopia, but he's the master of this one. He's the king of this one. Almost like compassion, two words, a compound word that means hurt with, essentially. Almost like compassion, to suffer along with somebody else. Doesn't wait until thorns disappear. That wouldn't even make sense. But it's learning what it means to turn that suffering into a tool for the most powerful work on earth. The work of the Spirit of the Christ. The work of compassion and kindness and love and justice. It's interesting, Paul put it this way in that very same passage in Galatians. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. He dove into it. He embodied it. Wore it on his head like royalty. And then they took him off that cross and they buried him in a tomb where it seemed clear that another good man had succumbed to the thorns. People had put their hopes in Jesus. It got a little strange toward the end because he just really wasn't anything like the Messiah that everybody was expecting. But now he'd completely failed. Rome had killed him. The thorns got another good one. The curse had done what the curse does, and no matter how hard you try, life loses. But here's the thing, 3 days later, somehow, against all intuition and belief, none of the early followers could believe this. That's why there are gospel accounts. He walked out of the grave alive and well. He was alive. And yet he kept his scars, and he showed those scars, his hands, his feet, his side. He showed those scars to his followers as if to say, hey, thorns leave stories, so tell them. Resurrection doesn't erase pain and disappointment. It transforms it into wisdom and experience that others can trust, that others can benefit from. And some of you have been through a level of stuff to know that what I'm about to say is true. The highest concentration of pain, of thorns, is where we most often come into contact with the divine and simultaneously discover what's most true about ourselves. The highest concentration of thorns, that's where we find all the truest, purest, deepest stuff. You think about these moments in the Bible when things were at their most challenging, perhaps they're seeming most impossible, and those are the very circumstances that turned out to be the epicenter of waking up to ultimate reality. That was where God and awareness of the self and the other is most acute. You and I spend so much energy avoiding thorns, and for good reason. I mean, what idiot goes looking for hardship? What idiot goes looking for pain she doesn't have to deal with? But we spend so much time and energy, and so much of our time and energy that it starts to actually become our personality, that we avoid thorns. But what happens when we see that the very spaces where we are most apt to find what we wish more than anything that we could find, those are going to be found in the very places that we continue to avoid, dismiss, deny, explain away with silly explanations? What happens when we come to finally see the thing I want most is found in the thing that I avoid the most? So here's the truth. Human beings will not transform. They will not evolve. We will not elevate our consciousness. We won't become truer versions of ourselves without difficulty and hardship. And if I could push a button and change that, I probably would. But those are the rules. It's always, always, always been this way. Human beings won't change unless there's some sort of hardship. It's true for individuals. It's true for cultures. It's always been this way. There is no other way, same as it ever was. But it's a two-edged sword, because as much as thorns can be the motivators to increased depth and sensitivity, greater compassion, to transformation like we want, it can also motivate us to retreat into ourselves, to retreat more into ego and false self and personality, more selfishness, more self-prioritization. Even at the expense of ourselves, at the expense of those that we're saying that we love, we become more superficial, we become more fearful, more angry, more reactionary, and more patterned in our behavior. Thorns are inevitable, but what they produce is way more up to us than we realize. And again, it's true for each of us, and it's true for all of us. It's true for our nation right now. Think about what 2020 has dumped on us. Think about all of the layers of difficulty and stress upon us right now as a people. And it's true for people all over the world, but just as here in the U.S., what's happening right now on this Sunday, all the things that we could name. What will we do with all these sharp edges? Will we grow? Will we become more aware and wiser and more compassionate? Or will we shrink back and become more cynical and defensive and waste it? We have way more choice in that than we realize. And of course you're going to get hurt if you lean into humanity. Of course you're going to get hurt. If you have a relationship, there's going to be pain in it. You can't get out of it. So you got to stop looking at other people's relationship and saying, why is theirs going so well? I have a front row seat to all the times it hasn't gone well, frankly. Oftentimes when you're looking at somebody at your church or looking at a couple or a friendship and wishing you had that, chances are I've talked to them recently and there are thorns growing in that relationship too. Of course you're going to get hurt. when you lean into humanity and when you relate. Of course, you have been hurt, and that pain is insisting that you take no more risks, no more cuts, no more tears, of course. But Jesus is teaching us how to navigate these thorns, because it can transform us one way or another into purer versions of ourselves, or it'll make us recoil and become more counterfeit versions of ourselves. Now, in the past, at this point in the illustration, I've sort of made it sound like the point, at this point of the empty tomb, this was the end of the curse of death. But thorns stretched well beyond the empty tomb and have torn up quite a bit of humanity since the resurrection. And I want you to hear me say that believing in Jesus and believing he died and resurrected, I want you to hear me say that believing that doesn't de-thorn your roses. It really doesn't. Some of the worst things that have ever happened in human history happened after Jesus walked out of the tomb. But John sees a vision of what might be. He says, on the other side of the river, this is in Revelation, when he's coming to the end of Revelation, and he's seeing things resolving, sort of fixing. Evil's been dealt with. He says, on the other side of the river is this tree of life with 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. You remember the first tree, those leaves became pants. Now these leaves are for the healing of the nations. Not the nation, the nations. This is something for the whole world. Nothing accursed will be found there anymore. No more curse. Almost as if there was a time before the beginning and a time after the new beginning on the far side of both gardens, where life as we know it is a vision, but it's not a fully lived reality. We can't really get our head around it. We wouldn't know what it was like to live on the far side of either garden, where the thorns are gone and there's no more need to live in tension with them at all. And I have no idea what that would be like. And it doesn't do me any good to paint a picture of it and to try to be hopeful about it as though I've been and now I'm inviting you to come. I'm not going to do that. I have no idea how literal or how metaphoric John was being. I have no idea what it would be like to be a human being without thorns and the love that we use to compensate for those thorns. But that doesn't matter. For now, what I can assure you is that we live between the gardens. And there are always, always, always thorns involved between the gardens. There's no other place for us to live out our days. We live between the gardens and there are thorns everywhere. There's no other existence available. We live out every moment between the gardens. It's always been this way. And it's here that Jesus says, follow me. Not away from the thorns, but through them, toward him and toward others. And so I think that I should tell you, cut down thorns that are within your power to cut down. Cut down as many as you can for yourself, but for those around you. What an act of love to remove or to heal pain, to be a source of gentleness and kindness that others can see Jesus in. Cut down every thorn you can. Thorns in your neighborhood, thorns in your school, the way that we elect people, the way that we collaborate, in all the different ways that we collaborate. Cut down every thorn that you can and cut them down again when they grow back, because they will. They're never always gone. They will come back. Never deny what thorns are doing to others simply because they don't grow where you live. And I want to tell you, go to counseling and get honest about your wounds, because you have been wounded. The thorns have gotten you. They've gotten me. And until you can get honest about your wounds, you'll be living out of wounds. And the goal is to live out of our scars, to tell stories about scars, not to try to live out of unhealed wounds. And I want to tell you to never spiritualize pain as those thorns, as if those thorns are only going to affect those who are weak of faith. That if you had enough faith, you wouldn't have gotten hurt. You wouldn't have gotten disappointed. You wouldn't have been mistreated. The bottom wouldn't have fell out of whatever project or job or your health if you just had more faith. Never spiritualize pain as though thorns are reserved for people with weaker faith. And don't do it to yourself either. That crown and those scars on Jesus' human body are an absolute promise that in this life you will have trouble and pain, no matter how devoted you are or aren't. There's just thorns here and there between the gardens, and that's where we live. None of us are exempt. And I want my younger siblings especially to listen to me in this. You're going to get your butt kicked out there. You're going to get your butt kicked out there. And it's going to seem like God has failed you, or you have failed God, or you have failed each other. And I want you to see Jesus on that cross weeping and bleeding with cyanide jabbed into his forehead. It leads us through those butt kickings, not out of them. To be a compassionate, wise follower of the Christ is not to avoid pain and hardship. It's a way of learning how to not be tyrannized by it. That we don't have to decide things out of fear and vigilance, but we can do so out of trust and love. That we don't have to live so invulnerably that nothing bad and therefore nothing good ever gets in. Instead, we can be like Jesus. We can live in this world, thorns and all, and be known for our kindness, our humility, our honesty, our right-making, our patience, our love. And so, my dear siblings, may we thrive between the gardens, and may we thrive together.
Thank you for joining us today, and welcome home. If you are in need of assistance during this crisis, please reach out at crosspoint.org/help.